So, good morning, everyone. I'm excited today to help host the final Port Gen Advanced Port Gen training in partnership with the Port of Seattle. My name is Tiffany Scroggs, and I'm joined here with Leslie Miller from the Washington Apex Accelerator. And we're going to get right to it. I'm going to start us off by introducing Emily Ho with the Port of Seattle. Emily, good morning. Thanks for being here today.
Morning, Tiffany. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Tiffany and Leslie and Apex for helping us put the Advanced Port Gen on. This is our last webinar until our end of year celebration, and this is going to be quite the finale. Really excited about this. We've got some really helpful information coming up for you, specifically on some of the biggest can be some of the biggest obstacles or challenges for learning about how to do construction contracting at the port, as well as my colleague Allison Calvert from the Construction Labor Group to talk about our PLA requirements and what you need to know and how you need to get ready to be compliant with that. So without further ado, I'm really excited for all that. I'm really excited for you all for taking the time to learn about this so that you can be successful with us at work. And so I'll hand it back over to you, Tiffany, I think. And
Yeah,
actually, I'll pull up the screen.
Yep, go ahead and pull up your slides here. And so what we're not going to do today is dive too far into the very basics of doing business with a government agency like the port. And that training is found in other spots, and we can work with you one-on-one if that's kind of why you're here today. Today's more of an advanced class on some key components of doing business at the port that are somewhat unique to the port and sometimes trip up new contractors that are interested in doing business at the port. So we're excited to dive in. This is training that we've never had before. I've been at this for 15 years, and so I'm excited to learn the content today, and I'm grateful for the port to provide their training and expertise.
And I'll hand it over now to Allison, switching gears from badging over to our PLA requirements.
Great. Thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is Allison Calvert, and I am the construction labor manager here at the Port of Seattle. I supervise the folks in the construction labor group. And you wouldn't necessarily know it by the name of the group, but we are the people who administer and monitor the project labor agreement that is in place on certain Port of Seattle projects, as well as the Port of Seattle's priority hire and apprenticeship programs that fall both under projects that are covered by the PLA and for priority hire, and then apprenticeship, of course, falls under projects that are both covered and not covered by the PLA. So PLA stands for Project Labor Agreement. And you may have, if you've worked for public agencies like King County or the City of Seattle or Sound Transit, you may be familiar with these types of agreements because those agencies use them as well. Sometimes they're called Community Workforce Agreements or CWAs. So that's another name for it, similar type of agreement. So if you've worked on a project that's covered by a CWA, this is going to sound pretty familiar to you. It's much of the similar process. So before I get into all this, just a little bit of background on the PLA. The port has been using one on projects since November of 1999. So if I'm doing my math right, I think that comes out to 26 years. So they're pretty common at the Port of Seattle. And I know that there are probably a lot of things in the PLA that might be difficult for businesses. There might be some things that are kind of a pain to get through. I get it. Today, I'm here to talk with you and help you learn how to work under the project labor agreement. Not so much here to talk about the why of things that are under the project labor agreement. So I am happy to chat with you about any of that, the why of the things, if you want to reach me offline outside of this meeting. And you'll see at the end, I've provided my contact information for y'all. So with that, let's dig in. So what is the project labor agreement? High level, it's an agreement between the Port of Seattle and construction labor unions, mostly in the King County area. It applies to all contractors of every tier working on a project that is covered by the PLA. So that means it applies to the prime contractor, the general contractor on the project. It'll apply to first tier subcontractors, second tier subs, third tier subs, however many tiers you got. It applies to every single subcontractor performing work that would be covered by RCW 3912, which is just the state law that requires payment of prevailing wages. It does things like setting standard wages and working conditions for projects. Now, that doesn't mean standard wages. It doesn't mean that every single worker on the project gets paid exactly the same amount. But it does mean that within certain trades, folks are getting paid consistently and fairly. Those working conditions, it sets language for shifts and lunch breaks and turnaround pay and overtime and all that good stuff. It does include requirements for priority hire and apprenticeship. I'll get into those here a little bit more, but on a high level, priority hire prioritizes the hiring of workers from economically distressed zip codes in King County, Snohomish County, and Pierce County. Apprenticeship prioritizes the hiring of apprentices, so those who are still learning their craft. And then there are aspirational goals under apprenticeship for the hiring of apprentices who are women and people of color. More to come on that. The PLA is open to all contractors to work under, whether you are a union shop contractor or an open shop contractor. If you're open shop, it just means you're not affiliated with the union. So you do not need to become a union contractor to work under this agreement. We have lots of open shop contractors who work successfully under these agreements. This is really cool. Particularly for the port, it prevents strikes and lockouts. So the PLA is a valuable tool for public agencies like the Port of Seattle because by preventing those strikes and lockouts, it can really help us keep projects on schedule and help us mitigate any delays because of a union strike. So for example, I think a few years ago, the Glazers Union went on strike. They're the folks who do things related to glass, like windows or glass doors and things like that. So those, the union workers in that trade went on strike, but any projects that were covered by a project labor agreement or community workforce agreement throughout all the public agencies who use those workers still showed up on our projects because we have that no strike provision. So things like that really, really help us keep these on schedule. Another thing that's really helpful for the port under the PLA is that it contains a dispute resolution process for grievances and jurisdictional disputes. So those can really help keep the project on schedule as well. A dispute will not stop work on the project. And we can go on to the next slide. All right, so not every project at the port is going to be covered by the PLA. This tells you a little bit of information about which projects are covered or are likely to be covered. Generally, projects estimated at $5 million or more without FAA funding. All right, so I call those locally funded projects. If it's $5 million or more at the time of bid, likely to be covered by the project labor agreement. We've also started covering some tenant reimbursement agreement projects or TRA projects. So those are projects where the tenant, maybe at the airport, might technically be an owner of the project. But then since they are leasing space from the port as a condition of that lease agreement, we might say, we're going to use a project labor agreement on this project. That last bullet point regarding FAA projects, historically, FAA funded projects have been covered by the PLA. The situation we're in right now is PLAs have sunsets. So you negotiate an agreement and it might be good for 3 to 5 years, and then you need to renegotiate it. The FAA PLA we were using had expired we do have a tentative agreement together with the unions. So we have an agreement that both the port and the labor unions are happy with. Right now, we're just awaiting FAA approval. So as soon as we get the word from the FAA that, yes, they're okay with it, we can start applying that to FAA funded projects again. Let's move on. All right, so some things that can come up when you're working on PLA projects. All contractors are going to be required to sign a letter of assent. That's in the PLA as an attachment. I think it's attachment A, should be the very first one. But that just means you're agreeing to comply with all of the terms and conditions of the PLA just for the duration of your work on the project. So as long as you're working on the PLA project, you agree to all the terms and conditions by signing that letter of assent. Another one, this is new. This is part of our PLA that was just negotiated at the end of last year. And so we're just now starting to see it come live with projects, is that all contractors need to sign and comply with the compliant contractor checklist. My next slide, which we're not going to go to quite yet, but my next slide is going to show you kind of what that looks like. And I'll go over those things that are on that checklist here once we get to it. So stay tuned for that. All contractors also need to attend a pre-job conference, and that's how you make your jurisdictional trade assignments. Pre-job conferences need to happen at least 2 weeks before you start work on the project. You can attend your pre-job up to 90 days in advance of working on the project. So if you win a bid on a PLA covered project, say you find out today, oh cool, I'm the successful low bidder, and maybe you're starting in January, we're within that 90 days, so you could do your pre-job anytime between now and 2 weeks prior to starting work on the project. Those pre-job conferences happen online through Zoom, just like we're doing here. They occur every Tuesday. They're either going to be at 11 in the morning or 1 in the afternoon. If you are working on a PLA covered project and you need to do your pre-job, your prime contractor will work with you on getting you scheduled for the pre-job. And then they'll work with the folks on my team to make sure we get you in there. So I mentioned you make your jurisdictional trade assignments during that pre-job. That is so any jurisdictional disputes can be worked out in advance of you starting on the project. So that's one of those important things that I was talking about, why the port likes using PLAs so much, is because we can work out those any potential disputes before contractors start work on the project. Ultimately, it's up to you as the contractor to assign your work as you see fit. But by going to those pre-job conferences, if a union business agent maybe disagrees with how you've assigned your scope of work, they can basically make that known, put it on record that they disagree with your trade assignment. After the pre-job conference, if you would like to reassign your work, you will have an opportunity to do so. But again, ultimately, it's up to you as the contractor to assign your work as you see fit there. Moving on from pre-jobs for open shop contractors. So again, these are contractors who are not signatory to any union. You do have some limitations on the number of workers from your existing workforce that you can bring onto the project. I know that's a pain. That's the way the language is under the CWA. So I just really want to make that clear that you take a look at that language. So you'll identify up to 3 journey level core workers that you can bring with you onto the project, and up to 2 apprentices if you have any open shop apprentices who work for you that you'll employ on the project. Now, there can be exceptions to every rule, okay? So if you feel like you have an extenuating need to bring on more than those 3 journey level core workers, you're going to talk with your prime about it. They're going to talk with me or someone on my team about it. And we can help you make that ask of the union hall to see if they would be okay with you bringing on additional core workers. We can't promise that that's always going to happen, but we will be there in your corner to help you make that ask. Strongly recommend, though, if you're preparing your bid for a PLA project, you prepare it with that 3 journey level core worker limit in mind. Don't assume that you will be able to use additional core workers. So also for open shop contractors, your core workers do need to be dispatched from the appropriate union hall. They do not need to be union members. Again, no one is required to become a union contractor. No one is required to become a union member, but they do need to be dispatched from the appropriate union hall before they start work on the project. And we can help you with that process as well if you're not sure who to contact. Union trust payments are required for all workers on the project. So if you're a union contractor and your workers are union members, you're very familiar with this process already. But if you're open shop, even your core workers need to make union trust payments, and those trust payments can be paid as a portion of the total wage package. Okay, so it's not necessarily an additional amount on top of the wages you are already paying your workers. They come out of that wage package, which leads me to my next point, following union CBA wage escalation schedules. So the way wages work on PLA projects, they're tied to the union collective bargaining agreements. Luckily, most of those wages in the union CBAs match prevailing wage rates, right? So if you look up the wage rate for a general labor on the LNI website, and then you look up the wage rate for general labor under the labor's collective bargaining agreement, those two rates are going to match. There may be some instances where state prevailing wage rate is higher or lower than the union CBA rate. So you just got to make sure you're paying the higher of those two if they differ. Another thing that might be unfamiliar is with public works projects. Some of you all might be used to locking in your wages for 24 months at the beginning of a project. You can't do that with PLA covered projects. You need to follow the union wage escalation schedule that's listed in their CBA. For most trades, that means a once a year escalation, but some trades will escalate their wages twice a year. So you'll want to be looking at that information as you prepare your bid. And if you're not sure how to find CBAs or anything like that, reach out to us. We can help you make that connection with the appropriate union hall. As a subcontractor, you may need to help contribute to priority hire and apprenticeship. And I'll get to that here in just a second. And lastly, just make sure you're adhering to all of the terms and conditions of the PLA. If you're not sure what something means, please don't guess. Please reach out to us and we will help you interpret any language you're unsure of. And let's move on to that compliant contractor checklist on the next slide. So this is my second bullet point that I mentioned in the previous slide. This is new to the port under our most recent PLA. And any subcontractor performing work must comply with everything that's listed here on this checklist. This is within the PLA as well. So you need to be a registered training agent with the program that is covering your scope of work that you are performing on the project. This is waived if your subcontract is $100,000 or less at the time of bid. But if you're bidding on a package that's $100,000 or more, you need to become a training agent with a registered apprenticeship program covering the scope of work you're performing. This is regardless if you are actually using apprentices. Maybe you only have 2 workers out there. They're both going to be journey workers. You don't have a need for apprentices. I recognize this is a big headache, but you still need to become a registered training agent. There are several ways to do that. There's an open shop apprenticeship program called CITC. You can also become a training agent with any of the union apprenticeship programs if you tell them that you're doing this because you're working on a PLA covered project. So it's kind of a headache. We're all figuring out together, but contact me if you have any questions about this or if you're not sure how to become a training agent. Second bullet point, pretty straightforward there. Just make sure you got all the licenses that you need in order to perform work in the state of Washington as a construction contractor. Third one there, you need to not have had any willful safety violations or failure to abate those safety violations in the past 3 years. So if you had a safety violation, but you took steps to resolve it, that's okay, right? But if you had a safety violation and then didn't do anything about it, that would flag you, and you wouldn't be able to accurately check that box here on this checklist. Next one, also pretty straightforward. You need to not be debarred. You need to legally be able to bid on public works construction projects here in Washington State. And then that last one, if you're a subcontractor, you need to commit to self-performing at least 30% of the work in your bid package. So basically, you wouldn't be able to bid on a package and then sub out 90% of the work because you would only be self-performing 10% of that work. And then you can see here, you would sign at the bottom, put your company name, your title, your date, and your signature. So we can move on to the next slide. All right, so regarding priority hire, apprenticeship, and preferred entry, these things are pretty cool. I think they're pretty cool because it helps us get folks into the construction industry who may have historically been excluded. So folks who live in low-income areas, economically distressed areas, women and people of color. We haven't historically seen a lot of folks like that in the construction industry. There are worker shortages, and by bringing in new folks into the construction industry, we can ensure that we've got a good, strong workforce moving forward. So that's what Priority Hire seeks to do. And apprenticeship, of course, is a great way for folks who are still learning their craft to earn while they learn on construction projects. So PLA's got requirements for the hiring of priority workers and apprentices and preferred entry apprentices. Now, preferred entry apprentices, you may not have heard this term before, but you might be familiar with pre-apprenticeship training programs. So a preferred entry apprentice is just someone who has graduated from a pre-apprenticeship training program before they go into their full apprenticeship program. Pre-apprenticeship training programs are programs like a new PACT, PACE, Youth Build. Several high schools in Seattle Public Schools, Federal Way Public High Schools, Renton Public High Schools have them as well. And it's just something that gives apprentices a little bit of a leg up. Maybe someone's interested in construction, but they don't know how to read a tape measure. They've never swung a hammer before. Someone like that might not be a very successful apprentice if they don't have just a little bit of a background. So they might go into a pre-apprenticeship training program to learn about those things and help themselves be a more successful apprentice. Those pre-apprenticeship training programs just so happen to serve a lot of the population we're trying to reach with priority hire. So folks in economically distressed areas, women, and people of color. So that's kind of what all those things are. Let's get into what the requirements and goals under the PLA are. So on PLA projects, 20% of the labor hours need to be performed by priority workers. Those are folks who live in economically distressed zip codes in King, Snohomish, and Pierce County. 15% of the labor hours per craft should be performed by apprentices. So 15% of all the hours performed by carpenters should be apprentice. 15% of all the hours performed by laborers should be apprentices. 15% of all the hours performed by electricians should be apprentices. You get the idea there. The state law, by the way, for that one is just 15% of all labor hours. The PLA goes a little bit further by saying 15% of labor hours per craft. In terms of aspirational goals, 21% of apprentice hours should be performed by people of color, while 12% of apprentice hours should be performed by women. And then 1 out of every 5 apprentices should be preferred entry. So you can bring on folks from your existing workforce to help meet these goals and requirements if you've got them. Union dispatch halls will dispatch priority workers out of order for you. So that is a big help as well. And one person can meet more than one of these requirements. So if you have someone who lives in a priority hire zip code, who is an apprentice, who is a woman and a person of color, and they graduated from a preferred entry program, that one person would count towards 5 different requirements and goals, which can be hard to do with one person, but you can often find someone who might be both a priority worker and an apprentice, or both a woman and person of color, right? So lots of different ways to help meet those requirements and goals. big thing to remember, it's up to the prime contractor to figure out how they're going to meet these things out of total project hours. So as a subcontractor, you don't need to have exactly 20% of your hours worked by priority workers and 15% apprenticeship, right? But any help you can give your prime contractor in meeting these things out of the total project hours, I'm sure prime contractors will really, really appreciate it. Let's move on to the next slide. All right, so some things you can do to prepare if you're thinking about bidding on a PLA covered project. The biggest thing is reading the PLA. You can read any applicable CBAs. So again, those are collective bargaining agreements. CBAs from maybe the laborers, carpenters, operating engineers. And if you need help accessing those, reach out to me. I can help you get copies of those. Plan for wage escalations for your workers. So again, I mentioned earlier, you can't lock in your wages for 24 months like you might be able to on other public works projects. You need to follow that wage escalation schedule that is under the union CBA. So make sure you're planning to escalate your wages throughout the project. Review the steps for becoming a training agent. Again, you can reach out to CITC, which is that open shop apprenticeship program, or you can reach out to a union apprenticeship program, tell them you're working on a PLA project and ask how to become a training agent. We can also help you with that process if you reach out to us, but good to figure out how you're going to do that if you're not already a training agent. If you're already a training agent, that is wonderful. If you continue to be a training agent, that's great. If you're an open shop contractor, you'll want to plan for which core workers you're going to bring onto the project. So again, remember, there's that 3 journey level core worker limit and then 2 apprentice limit. If you've got that extenuating need for more core workers, reach out to us. We'll talk about it, but plan your bid as if you need to adhere to that 3 journey level limit. Again, if you're open shop, make sure your workers are aware of that union trust payment requirement. And you can also read through a previous apprenticeship and priority hire annual report if you're curious to see what the numbers have been like for previous years under priority hire and apprenticeship. If you're curious to see, which contractors used apprentices, which contractors used priority workers, how many projects were there, things like that. They're kind of fun and interesting to read. They do get a little number heavy, but I think they're pretty cool. If you are able to contribute to priority hire and apprenticeship, plan which workers from your existing workforce you are going to bring onto the project who will help that prime contractor meet those requirements. And then lastly, please reach out to us with any questions that you have. So I mentioned I'm the manager of the construction labor group, but I've got 4 other people, soon to be 5 people on my team. I've got 3 construction labor specialists who help contractors work under the PLA. And then currently we have 1 priority hire and apprenticeship specialist who helps contractors with priority hire and apprenticeship. So I mentioned earlier, any questions about the PLA, any questions about priority hire, I want you to reach out to us. Instead of maybe making an assumption of what a piece of language means, just reach out to us and we'll talk through it and we'll make sure we all have that same understanding of what this language under the PLA means, what this means with priority hire and apprenticeship. And we can go to the next slide, which I think is just, frequently asked questions. So some questions we've encountered from contractors before. Does the PLA bind all subcontractors? We went over that, and the answer is yes. All contractors performing covered work must sign a letter of assent, binds you to the PLA only for the duration of your work on the project. When you're done working on the project, that goes away. How do you know if a project is covered by the PLA? Now, that's going to be included in the bid specifications. You can view those through the Port's Vendor Connect software, accessible through the Port of Seattle website. You can also call us and ask if it's covered by the PLA. Do I need to be a union contractor? You do not. Again, open shop contractors frequently work under the PLA. Union shop, open shop, doesn't matter. Does the PLA bind suppliers? And the answer is no. The PLA does not bind suppliers. It only applies to subcontractors. But if someone is supplying something that needs to be installed on the job site, now that would be covered work. Okay. Will I be required to employ union workers? And the answer to that is not necessarily. If you're open shop and you reach your core worker limit and you need additional workers beyond that limit, then you do have full access to the union hiring hall, and you can request a dispatch from the unions for a union worker to help you meet your workforce needs. Do I need to hire priority workers and apprentices? So again, that's the prime's responsibility for figuring out how they're going to make that work out of all the total project hours. Your prime may ask you how you can contribute to it. So I would definitely check in with your prime to see what their expectations are from you in terms of contributing to priority hire and apprenticeship. Let's move on. So this is my last slide. This is just some information that's I hope will be helpful to you. You've got my contact information there. You've got our priority hire specialist contact information there. His name is Errol. And then you've got a few links to web pages. You can find information on our project labor agreement, priority hire, and how to look for bid opportunities there. I just want to say we're in the process of updating our project labor agreement webpage. The PLA is actually not currently up there. It will be up there soon. But if you need a copy, if you're really itching to read it, because I have just been so captivating today, send me an email and I'll get you a copy. And I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Allison. Yeah, I think after I talk to you, I was like, I need that PLA. Let me read it. So maybe you will have some takers.